I'm Kent Myers.
I'm Mick Cornett, and it's time for the verdict. And welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. This is a show where we discuss topical issues, specifically legal issues of broad interest. And let me quickly introduce one of Oklahoma's top legal experts and my co-host, Kent Myers. Kent, we're discussing the issue of whether or not Terry Nichols should be retried in Oklahoma. And this is an issue that a lot of people in this state are concerned with.
Yes, since the bombing in April of 1995, it's been the most significant issue to all Oklahomans, I think. Terry Nichols was tried in Denver in the federal system and convicted of causing the deaths of 8 individuals and sentenced to life imprisonment, but did not get the death penalty.
Yeah, I think what you just hit on is an important reminder for people that there were just 8 deaths that were basically the basis of that trial up in Denver. Why was it just 8 and why not just everybody?
Well, my understanding is that the 8 deaths tried in the federal system were those of federal employees, and the 160 other deaths that came about as a result of that bombing did not receive treatment in the federal case, and that's what Bob Macy is planning to do now by charging Terry Nichols with 160 murder cases here in Oklahoma County.
So this is a legal issue, this is a political issue, this is a financial issue, and of course it's an emotional issue.
Yeah, the legal issue would be, of course, death penalty or not. The financial issue would be, is it too expensive? Should we be spending the state's resources in doing this? The emotional issue may be the most significant for those that are really close to the tragedy, and that is, do we reopen these wounds? Do we look at this again and have to revisit those terrible, terrible days?
Now, why don't you introduce our guests?
Well, we're just thrilled to have the guests we do. We have State Representative John Nance, recently re-elected from Bethany. John, glad to have you here.
Thank you very much.
And a very prominent criminal defense lawyer and a good friend, John Coyle. John, glad to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
And later in the show, we'll be visiting with Oklahoma County District Attorney Bob Macy. Now, since everyone here is anxious to get this debate started, why don't we take a quick break and then get after it. Should Terry Nichols be retried in Oklahoma? We'll get in depth with the legal and emotional issues involved. Should be a lively discussion right here on The Verdict.
I enrich our cultural landscape.
I help define our quality of life.
I am one of 4,000 artists in central Oklahoma who receive
support from Allied Arts, this community's united arts organization.
I am an Allied artist.
Mama, I played with Natalie today.
You did?
She's a girl at my school. She has pretty hair, and I like her long hair. We played together, we talked together, and we were eating outside, and bugs got on it.
Ooh.
They're just fly around and get on people's food. Then we killed all the bugs, and then it was gone before we knowed it.
Did you know that in Oklahoma there is a shortage of child care providers for infants and toddlers? Consider working in child care.
Opening daycare was the best thing that I ever done because I get to stay at home with my children and make a living. To me, when they're coming in upset or sad and me as a provider can make them happy, to me that makes my day.
I was busy raising my 4 children and I often felt, how can I help, with our family income? So I turned to home daycare. I'm very happy in doing my job. It's the light of my life.
You will be rewarded more than the money that you get. You will be making a difference. It's wonderful. It's just memories for the heart that you can't get anywhere else.
If you have a special place in your heart for children, there is a real need for infant and toddler caregivers in our state.
Choose a career in child care.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and we're posing the question, should Terry Nichols be retried in Oklahoma? Well, did we draw straws backstage? Who gets to go first here?
Well, I'm going to ask State Representative John Nance to go first, and I think the question I'd like to see you address, and John, you as well, is without regard to whether Terry Nichols should be retried in Oklahoma, can he receive a fair trial in Oklahoma? I want to call to each of your attention a graphic we have from a Tulsa World poll that asked the question, can Terry Nichols in Oklahoma receive a fair trial? And by the very slightest of margins, most Oklahomans thought, yes, he could. But there's, of course, a very substantial number of Oklahomans that say Terry Nichols cannot receive a fair trial, not only in Oklahoma County, but Oklahoma in general. John, what do you think about that? Can the trial be fair to Terry Nichols here in Oklahoma?
Kent, I believe it can be. Those statistics show 46.6 and then 46.5 yes and no, so it's a slight margin. But with the challenges that are available to defense attorneys and to the prosecution, I think that they'll be able to find a jury that can weigh the facts in the trial and give a fair trial to Terry Nichols.
Well, John Coyle, you're a longtime defense lawyer. Your first mission is to make sure the trial is fair. What do you think about this? Can Terry Nichols receive a fair trial in Oklahoma?
I sure don't think so. And I think that in all the times that I've been involved in jury selection, which is not only my job to see that the trial's fair, but particularly the prosecution's job as well. In all the cases that I've been involved in, the people who are Oklahomans involved in juries try very hard to be fair. There's no question about that. But they have to set aside the emotional impact of what the bombing meant to everyone. All of us were impacted. Everyone was impacted by the bombing in some way. And they have to be able to set that aside. It's extremely difficult to do.
How would we choose this jury? What questions would they be asked, would you guess?
Well, I mean, everyone's going to be asked how they were affected by the bombing in any way. And obviously that's going to have not only an impact for the time they're on the jury, but that's a lifelong impact. And that's something that they've been involved in for 5 years now. And it'll be more by the time of the trial. It seems to me very difficult to set aside. That's why the trials were originally in Denver, because the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals has already said, has already ruled that he can't receive a fair trial in Oklahoma.
I'd take exception to that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think a lot of the passion is gone from those who were victims or who were very closely tied to it, and those who were not so closely tied to it. And secondly, in 5 years, there's been a lot of people move into Oklahoma that could be a pool that could be drawn from that wouldn't have that kind of considered baggage to come into a jury.
Well, let me ask you each this. Do you think it would be advisable, not trying to tell the judge what to do here, but would it be advisable to move it out of Oklahoma County? Would that do anything to more likely ensure a fair trial?
I think most of the people have already decided it probably won't be in Oklahoma County, even though I'm not so sure we couldn't have a fair trial in Oklahoma County. It would certainly be nice to be able to keep a centralized area for the trial, but it's probably going to be moved to a different venue.
Oh, I don't see any way that if there is going to be a trial, I don't see any way that you could have it anywhere but a county other than Oklahoma County. There are just too many strong feelings. There's too many things that happen to the community. And although, as John pointed out, there certainly has been a lessening of the daily conversation. I mean, it's not the topic that everyone visits, but all of us sure remember that time.
Well, why are we having the trial? Is it just to get the death penalty? Terry Nichols has been tried. He has been sentenced to spend the rest of his life in jail. Why are we trying him again? John, what do you think?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons why. Number one, Bob Macy is our elected official and DA who it's his responsibility to weigh the evidence and determine whether or not a charge or charges should be filed. And I think he's done that, and it was a crime that occurred in Oklahoma, in this county, and it's his responsibility to do that. It's number one. Number two, we don't know what the appeal system in the federal system is going to be. There could be changes from Congress. We already are experiencing a moratorium on the death penalty, which could affect McVeigh's trial or his situation. And there's always a question of appeals. So there's a lot of things that could change the situation as we see it in the federal case for McVeigh and Terry Nichols. And I just don't think we ought to take that risk.
John, you want to respond briefly?
Yes, I think this business about it being a risk is hogwash. It's not a risk. There's no question that Terry Nichols will spend the rest of his life in prison, even if Congress can change the statute and allow some sort of parole. He'd never be the guy to get the parole. They're never going to parole him. So he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, irrespective of what happens. If he gets a retrial, probably it's going to get the same result. And then at that point in time, if they don't, then there's no statute of limitations on murder.
Well, I agree with you, John, to a certain extent. You know, I'm not a lawyer. I'm an investigator by 30 years' experience with the federal government and the state. But number one, we've seen reverses. We've seen changes in the law. The moratorium on murder for the federal trial is an effective thing. There are a lot of appeals that could take place. And the thing that really concerns me is that 160 people have not had justice in the system. The 8 people that were tried, that McVeigh and Nichols were tried for, were federal law enforcement people. Many of those were personal friends. And they've had justice as far as the federal system's concerned. Oklahoma and the 160 people who are charged under the indictment against Nichols have not had justice. And I think that's a fair reason for us to have a trial in Oklahoma.
We need to stop it right there. Let's take a break. We'll return. Should Terry Nichols be retried in the state of Oklahoma? This is the verdict.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children. Over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers donating their time to represent children. Call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
Arts education builds brain power. With it, children learn faster, test higher, and go further. But in many Oklahoma schools, the arts have all but disappeared. Now you can help with 500 ways to arts power our schools, our teachers, our future.
Shriners Hospitals for Children offer some of the finest medical care in the world, and they provide it totally free of charge. The unique family-style care at Shriners Hospitals makes it feel like home to a lot of kids. There is a Shriners Hospital helping kids from this area. So if you know a child with problems of the bones, joints, muscles, or severe burns that could be helped by Shriners, call this number for more information. Shriners, building a better tomorrow for kids.
Just hanging on the court playing b-ball when these drugged up bugs came out from behind the wall. They said, "You're no good. We're the best in this neighborhood." With no delay, the game got underway. The drugged up bugs were too high to play. They couldn't even hold the ball. Couldn't pass, couldn't shoot, couldn't score at all. Couldn't find the paint. In school they thought they was cool, but now they ain't. That's the buzzer. Time to quit. Home Bees 100. Drug bug zip. The lesson here is so plain to see. Drug free is the way to be.
Should Terry Nichols be retried in Oklahoma? Welcome back to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett, along with Kent Myers. Where are we here now in this discussion?
Well, when we ended, we were talking about whether Terry Nichols would ever get out of prison or not. That adds another question to the agenda. If the only reason we're trying Terry Nichols again is to get the death penalty, is that an appropriate thing to do? Should we engage in all this just to get the death penalty when it was not obtained the first time? John Coyle, what do you think about that?
Well, of course, I'm against the trial and I'm against the death penalty under any circumstances. But I think particularly in this case, it is an extraordinary opportunity for us in Oklahoma. There is no question that Bob Macy is sincere in his desires and the things that he wants to do. But because he's our elected official doesn't mean that we have to agree with what he wants. I'm very concerned about Oklahoma. The perception throughout the country is Oklahoma City is the place of the bombing, the place of death, the place of the terror. We have an opportunity to make Oklahoma City the place of life and to come out and put the emphasis on our future, on the extraordinary economic opportunities in Oklahoma. It is a way to showcase Oklahoma to the world as the place of life. It's so different. It gives us a place or an opportunity to move forward, to move away from the tragedy and the death of the friends that all of us lost. And everyone that was involved in the federal criminal justice system, from defense lawyers to, at the time John was with the IRS, or prior to that, John was with the IRS and had friends. All of us had friends who died. Bob Macy did, all of us. So
well, that's a nice closing statement, John, but I would like to ask you, out of this book, In Their Name, which one of these people would you address and say that you're not worthy of a penalty trial, asking for those who murdered you to face justice in the judicial system? And I think you'd have to say that every one of these people deserve justice under our American system of justice, and I can't think of one of these people who you would face eye to eye and say, I don't think you deserve a trial.
So what is justice, John? Is it justice to bring all this up again for everyone in Oklahoma?
They've not been tried in Oklahoma.
Well, everybody knew about the trial in Denver. I mean, there was no big secret about what was going on.
There were
Everybody knows
only
they've
8
been
law
tried.
enforcement people, because of the way the statutes were set up, that they were tried for. The 8 federal agents. There are 160 people, including a child who in its trimester was considered to be manslaughter, and I think these people deserve justice. And we don't know what kind of jury verdict's going to come out. He may not get the death penalty. That's a big question that we may ask for it, but we don't know that he's going to get it.
So why in the world do we do this? Because
these people deserve their day in court.
They've already had justice.
No,
the people,
not
one
the
person has the
160.
death penalty. The other person is locked up for life without parole.
We don't know that he is. Would you guarantee that he'll never get out?
No one can guarantee anything. You can't guarantee that Tim McVeigh will get the death penalty. But why do we have to spend the money and do the things and dredge up all of these horrible feelings again? Is that justice for these people? Do we not ever want them to rest? Are we forever going to be the place of retribution, the state of vengeance?
I don't think we're a state of vengeance. I think we're a state of justice. I watched them build that building. I watched them tear it down. That building was worth $14,500,000 when it was or $500,000 when it was built. At the time of the explosion, it was worth over $35 million. I remember when Ms. Mondale came down and dedicated the art, was $250,000 just for the artwork in the building, and this doesn't consider the cost. $82 million for the investigation and the 2 trials in Denver. Money's insignificant to me in Oklahoma. It's costing us $60,000 a month for Mr. Hermanson and his group to act as defense for these people. It's been going on for 15 months. I say it's time we get a trial going and get justice for these 160 people.
Well, let me ask you both this question. You've raised some cost issues. That leads me into asking a question by use of a graphic, if we may, quoting our District Attorney Bob Macy. Bob has said you can't put a price on justice.
I agree.
Do you agree with that, John?
Yes, sir, I do.
So
otherwise, why have a police department? Because they don't pay for themselves. We have to fund them. So you could say, well, they don't create any income, so we ought to eliminate them. We can't do that. We'd have anarchy.
What do you say, John?
Well, there's no doubt about it. You can't put a price on justice. And so we spend more money on police and courts and spend more money on prosecutions and spend more money on the bombing trial. I think we ought to buy a poor kid a lunch. I think we ought to do hundreds of things. We ought to have good schools.
I don't think
there's
it's
a lot of
either or.
different things we can. Oh, it is an either or, because there's only so much money. And so why do we keep throwing good money after something that's nothing but done in the name of vengeance? It is not justice, it's vengeance. And so whatever price tag you put on it, that's all it is.
Well, you could put that title on any murder trial then, John, that we're vengeance. Well, the Bible says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Do we leave it up to the Lord to judge these people so nobody that's created a murder situation is ever tried?
All of us know that we have to protect people. The people are protected from these two people involved in the bombing, from Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols. They were involved in the bombing. Everyone's protected from them. They're both in prison at least for the rest of their life, and Terry Nichols has the death penalty.
And I contend that 160
people are protected.
Tim McVeigh.
Tim McVeigh.
Yeah, well, let me ask a different question, and one that I think if you were a survivor or a relative of someone that died would be very important, and that is the reopening of the wounds. Yeah. This has been a terribly tragic thing for a lot of people that we all know. Mm-hmm. Is this something that will bring about closure? Will closure ever come from something like this?
Most of the people that I've talked to can't hate that word.
Yeah.
The closure idea. I know Susan Walton, who's had 32 surgeries. She still walks with she's very disabled. I know Patty Hall, who was a clerk in the federal building. She's had 16 surgeries. She's now disabled. She works in the Capitol.
What do they think about the trial?
They have mixed feelings. They would like to see justice, but they don't want to hear all this evidence again. And it's my understanding that the evidence will be rather scant. It will not be near the trial that took place in Denver. There are fewer witnesses, and that it can be done. It can be done properly and promptly if we'll get with it.
John?
It's going to bring up every memory that we ever had about the bombing. This deal about it being a scant trial, it can't be. It's going to bring up everything about it. The majority of the people who were directly victimized, all of us, all Oklahomans were victims of the trial. But those who were directly victimized by the trial, they don't want the trial. The ones who lost loved ones. So in whose name are we doing this? If the people who lost loved ones don't want it, and the people who were injured don't want it,
I don't think you can say
it
that,
doesn't
John.
benefit the community, is it going to make the trial a tourist attraction? Is it?
What can't you say?
I don't think you can characterize a group or individuals. I've talked to a lot of them, and some, they know it's going to hurt, but they want the trial. People like Diane Leonard, who lost her husband, a Secret Service agent. She wants a trial. She cried when Terry Nichols got the verdict in Denver because she knew that it wasn't appropriate. There's the reason right there, John. We need justice.
I hate to be the bad person here, but we have got to call this to a halt. I want to thank both of you for coming. Appreciate you coming here. And we're going to have Bob Macy on in just a few moments, and he'll discuss what he's able to discuss. And in fact, the fact that he's under a gag order is something that we want to bring up, and we'll have Mr. Macy discuss that. You're watching The Verdict.
I enrich our cultural landscape.
I help define our quality of life.
I am one of 4,000 artists in central Oklahoma who receive
support from Allied Arts, this community's united arts organization.
I am.
I am.
I am an Allied artist.
All children deserve a life of hope and love. But sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children. Over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers donating their time to represent children. Call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
Wow, wow, wow. And they think I'm a baby. Just listen to my mom whining about finding childcare for me.
What are we gonna do? I've called every place in the book and nobody has a space for our baby.
She's all worried about stuff like quality and TLC.
You know, we've always talked about starting our own.
Let's do it.
Me, I just want to have fun. How about you? Maybe you should think about caring for infants and toddlers. Wait a minute, does this mean I have to share my toys?
At this at-risk elementary, teachers couldn't reach many students. until they began to teach with the arts, and the whole school blossomed. Yet there are many stories where bringing the arts back to school produced dramatic turnarounds. Call now. Help give more Oklahoma kids the arts power they deserve, and be a part of something big, Oklahoma's future.
And welcome back to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. Kent, as we close out here this show, and I know Bob Macy is going to join us here in a few moments, what is this going to cost? And I know you have a graphic that kind of shows the breakdown per individual that we're trying to release justice for.
Yes, the cost estimates of the trial for both prosecution and defense varied widely. There's a lot of dispute about whether they're accurate or not, but the graphic shows that the estimates run between $10 and $20 million total cost.
If it cost $10 million and you divided the amount of victims into it, you come up with that first figure. And if it cost $20 million, you would come up with the second figure.
Yeah, one can legitimately ask the question, even if that is the cost, is that too much per victim?
Well, is that more than a typical murder trial would take in Oklahoma County?
Well, Bob Macy would know that better than I, but I would suggest no, that that's probably not out of line with the normal cost, considering all costs, defense and prosecution costs.
Okay. Mr. Macy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Oklahoma County District Attorney Bob Macy.
Yeah, Bob, thank you for coming. We're really pleased that you would join us on this show. It's a subject that I know you have a great deal of interest in, but I also know that you are subject to a gag order.
That's true. Yeah.
Would you please tell our viewers what is a gag order in this case, and if you think it's appropriate or not?
In this case, it's a very broad gag order in that it prohibits any of the parties to the litigation from saying anything, discussing anything having to do with the evidence or and even legal issues having to do with the trial. And I think it's a good idea. I think this case needs to be tried in the courtroom and not in the media.
Mr. Macy, I hear people in the street say, they think it's a personal issue. They think this has become personal with you. How do you respond to charges like that?
I think John Nance responded the best when he said, you know, it's Bob Macy's job. I'm the District Attorney of Oklahoma County. I have been for 20 years. I've taken great pride in what I've tried to do. I've tried to make Oklahoma City the safest city in the nation, and I take great pride in that. Part of that, my responsibility is, whether it's popular or unpopular, to prosecute the people who get out and violate my citizens. I became a police officer in Oklahoma City in 1957 and fell in love with the people in Oklahoma City. And I've always been very protective towards them and very proud to be associated with them. And I think this is one of those situations, whether I like it or not, it's my job to bring these people to trial. It's up to a jury to decide what the punishment should be.
I have to cut you off there, Mr. Macy. Thank you. This time on the show went much too quickly. We appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Bob.
All right. Kent, where are we here? Can you close it up in a few seconds?
Well, it's a difficult thing to answer, and that's why we call this the verdict. The verdict means literally to speak the truth. We hope the viewers are going to have a better idea of what they think the truth is, having heard both sides.
All right, and stay tuned for us. Thanks again to our guests, State Representative John Nance, Attorney J.W. Coyle, and District Attorney Bob Macy. For Kent Myers, Mick Cornett. See you next time on The Verdict.